Hey y'all! This time around, I want to tackle one of my favorite franchises of all time, the John Wick franchise. I love these movies in all their gory glory. There's passion and artistry in every punch, every knife jab, and in every gunshot. The visual style and choreography are prettier than a pecan pie on the 4th of July, but I feel like when critics focus just on the style of John Wick, they miss a lot of what the franchise has to offer. There's something beneath the surface that makes these movies the standouts we all know and love, and well, that's what this video is about. Let's get to it. Okay, so the first movie is TheBomb.com for a myriad of reasons, but let's talk about the way it builds tension. The creators of that first film take the entire runtime to establish John's wounds. Being an assassin doesn't make you impervious to damage. There's a cost to be paid with every bullet. Because of this story mechanic, the audience gets a better understanding of the setting, the limitations of the characters, and ultimately, the stakes. You feel every sickening crunch as Vigo dukes it out in the rain with our good boy Keanu Reeves, because you've seen him shot and bloodied and just exhausted over the course of an hour and 30 minutes. We can't tell as an audience whether or not John's gonna actually have the stamina to carry out his revenge. And that's the key right there, that mystery, that intrigue, that oh no, will he make it? It's so hard to capture in a film. Just beating the tar out of your protagonist in the third act doesn't really establish the same kind of thrill. The people behind John Wick were willing to take the time and establish the limitations of the character. And it had a direct effect on how great the climax was.
Good seeing you, Dom. Yeah.
John Wick Chapter 2 is equally TheBomb.com, but it goes about building its tension in a completely different way. Gone is the punishing physicality established in the first film, replaced with a literal bullet shield. That's not to say that there isn't any physical limitation to John in the sequel, but rather the filmmakers choose to focus less on showing how the fights limit John and more on how the world around John is limiting. He's running out of time, or space, or bullets. The movie is still slowly communicating John's weakness throughout the plot, but it's a different kind of weakness. And when it all accumulates, you can still really feel the tension in the room.
Jonathan, just walk away.
Yeah, Jonathan. Walk away.
What have you done?
Finished it.
Even some of the best movies build their tension in ways that feel completely inauthentic. Romantic subplots, ticking time bombs,
and the prom's tomorrow!
But in the John Wick franchise, the tension is completely natural, despite being built in dramatically different ways. All of it takes you right to the edge. And by my standards, that's smart sequel making.
My boy's wicked smart.
So, if a person was going to, say, read a synopsis of the John Wick films and look at it really critically, I feel like they would just toss these movies out in the trash. Yet another bullet-riddled hero on a revenge mission kills a bunch of randos who don't speak English no good, and it all ends in a giant big boy rain fight. Lethal Weapon did it, and so did Jack Reacher, and oh yeah, the second Matrix film. Well-built tension can't cover up the fact that audiences are going to remember these exact same plot lines from other movies. But in this franchise, what would otherwise feel tropey comes off as fresh, unique, exciting. And I think I can actually sum up how the John Wick franchise does this in a single word: duality. Generally, in action cinema, you have two kinds of protagonists. The superhuman, whose remarkable abilities and Batman-esque ingenuity allow them to take on obstacles at every turn. And you have the underdogs, who manage to win out due to perseverance and luck. The people behind John Wick made the riveting choice to combine both of these action character traits into their protagonist. You're invested in the everymanness of John, being this wounded warrior, facing down a final opponent and drinking bourbon. He's classic, like John McClane or Indiana Jones. But you also know that it was only due to his superhuman ability that he got to that final fight in the first place. This ends up borrowing from more modern heroism a la Mission Impossible or Taken. The duality here is clear. He's this cinematic hybrid of old and new. And because John has such a great duality of character, the more tropey elements of the franchise end up being subverted. In other words, John Wick is the best of both worlds when it comes to action leads. And that's part of what makes these films so great.
Mix it all together and know that it's the best of both worlds.
It's super easy to miss amongst the shooty McBang-bang of it all, but there's actually a lot of thematic layering going on in the John Wick films. First and foremost, these movies are about how to make good action movies. As I touched on before, John Wick loves walking away from explosions and cool cars and all sorts of the stuff that everybody, whap whap, ooh, kung fu baby. But these movies always manage to elevate those tropes by doing the unexpected. The fact that we love the club fight scene in the first John Wick gives total validity to every other amazing club fight scene that's ever been made. But the way the scene starts slow and builds to a high, the distinctive camera work, and the creative way the choreography goes about taking down the bad guys plays with our expectations of what a club fight scene can look like. It's a scene that matters not only as a cool set piece, but to the world at large. Taking something so typical and making it matter becomes a sort of challenge to any other filmmaker. You don't have to just repeat what works to make a great action film. You can still play the hits and do things a little differently. This franchise is also about loss, especially the first movie. The filmmakers approach the subject very directly and even vocalize it a few times. However, unlike other action revenge plots, John Wick doesn't demonize the emotion that comes with losing someone. It's an action film that encourages sadness and crying and a grim approach to death. John isn't on a revenge path because his wife is dead. He hardly even leaves his house after she passes. He doesn't even go out on the revenge mission because Buttwipe & Co. killed his dog and screwed up his old car. He can and does get new ones. No, the crux of the first John Wick's, the inciting incident, the entire reasoning for John to go out and murder a bunch of people is because he was robbed of a simple and pure moment of grief.
When Ellen died, I lost everything. Until that dog arrived on my doorstep. A final gift from my wife. In that moment, I received some semblance of hope. An opportunity to grieve unalone. And your son took that from me.
Yes, he's going through a tough time, but that's natural after the death of a loved one. What's unnatural and what awakens the animal that is John Wick is the blind, arrogant violence that ruined the peaceful routine of a person just trying to mourn. And while this might come off as a bit of an extreme response, we can all sympathize with John's anger at the situation. The theme of loss percolates into John Wick Chapter 2, but in an ironic twist of fate that I will be in love with forever, the second film actually critiques the stance on loss that was made in the first film. In the original, John mistakenly views his grief interruption as the ultimate tragedy, and while the filmmakers let us know that, yeah, that totally sucked and was totally not cool, losing your chance to mourn is not the end of the world. Specifically, it goes about doing this by showing us the three things John still has post-puppy murder. He's still got the memory of the life he once lived with his wife, he still has the connections he made in the criminal underworld, and he has an opportunity to choose the kind of person he wants to be, to choose the kind of life his wife would have wanted him to lead. The action of taking revenge in the first film, however, strips him of all of these things. The physical aspect of his wife's memory burns. His contacts all reject him, and he's forced into a life of running, of paranoia, of fear, rather than peace. This movie reminds us that despite looking like a hero and taking on bad guys, John Wick isn't to be admired for his revenge. True loss is allowing yourself to be so affected by your circumstances that you betray your idealism, and that you become something you never wanted to be. In short, there's a cost to be paid with every bullet.
So I guess you have a choice. You want a war? Or do you want to just give me a gun?
Somebody please get this man a gun.
I also think that these movies are largely about the idea of the mythic hero. And unless you read too much Rick Riordan as a kid or watched this insane Movies with Mikey video, I doubt you'll know where I'm going with this, but just stick with me. The characters in John Wick have a lot of similarities and parallel a lot of the characters in ancient myth, specifically ancient Greek myth. You have Vigo as Zeus, ruler of Mount Olympus, his son Yosef as Ares, the god of war, then Miss Perkins and Marcus as Artemis and Apollo, the gods of the hunt and archery respectively. And finally, you have what is perhaps my favorite parallel in the film, Winston, who I interpret to be Hera, the untouchable protector of heroes, who would sometimes double-cross Zeus when he got out of control.
I know what you're thinking, Jonathan. We live by a code. Which is why I'm not the one telling you with a certain helicopter to a certain helipad is being fueled for a certain someone.
In Chapter 2, the symbolism evolves and shows how the ancient Greek myths became less popular as other religions start to come to the cultural forefront. In the film, there's still tons of parallels. Santiago across the backdrop of a failing Jupiter, but you also get the Bowery King, a plucky young Christian upstart with his whole Yahweh Old Testament vibes. Winston actually transitions as a character, from Hera to a more Hindu, Christian, angel of death sort of thing. The symbolism might not be as obvious or one-to-one as in the first film, but the similarities are very clear, and you can hardly deny the connection because of the visuals. In showing us these similarities, I think the filmmakers are trying to make a statement about how action film operates in modern society. Way back in the ancient world, when you wanted to explain an aspect of life to someone, you would tell them a story, rather than logicking anything out. Ancient myth gave everyone a specific set of cultural values to hold on to. You would romanticize the persistence of Hercules, the mind of Odysseus, the bravery of Jason. They were stories that would allow everyone to get on the same page for a while and function as a collective. The same thing can be said of our staple American action franchises. Stories like Mission Impossible and The Fast and the Furious, or even The Terminator. They seem simplistic, but they're actually teaching us modern-day American values. Fight the odds against corruption like Tom. Respect your family like Vin. Resist external oppression like Linda. These are classic American values. John Wick brings that parallelism to the forefront of its story through symbolism. It's begging audiences to recognize just how important action cinema can be. They're the stories that keep us on the same page as an American society. The modern American myths.
Luke Skywalker. Life's a myth.
The beauty of John Wick is deceptive. It hides in these familiar nooks and crannies where you otherwise wouldn't expect anything to be. But much like a trifle, the second your spoon dips in, you realize that there's actually a lot more than pudding. There's these layers of tasty, wonderful goodness that will keep you coming back again and again.
Please, sir. I want some more.
The last thing I want to celebrate while talking about this franchise is a little thing called catering to your fans. It's why I made this video, and it's the main aspect of the John Wick series that I wish other movies would emulate. Here's the thing. I think these big entertainment corporations dropping millions of dollars on these effects-driven powerhouses have stopped caring about the action movie fan. Do they still know how to appeal to people? Yes. Do they still make good movies? Of course. But are they making action films for my dad obsessed with action films? No. They're making movies for the general public. With a goal like that, you lose something. Maybe not money or even the action audience, but you lose the soul of a community. You lose what bonded people to that genre in the first place. It's like drinking off-brand Coca-Cola. I mean, it may be soda, and I'll still guzzle it down, but I know there's better stuff out there. And if I had the option, I'd be getting real Coke instead. Action fans are not into romantic subplots where the love interest has zero agency. Action fans are not interested in plot lines that are so full of holes you could grate cheese through them. Action fans do not want your lazy, forgettable, nothingness fight scenes used to fill time and get butts in seats for the one time Tom Cruise hangs off a plane or whatever. John Wick 1 and 2 were the first movies I've seen in a long time that actually understood what action fans wanted from action films. You know what action fans want to see? Plucky, fun hotel sidekicks that give you bulletproof vests. Imaginative battle sequences that feel otherworldly. Dog sidekicks. That's what I'm talking about. Real, honest-to-God, Coca-Cola movies. The John Wick series fills a specific need in the cultural zeitgeist that wasn't being filled before, just by doing the simple task of catering to the fans of the genre. They're movies that foster specific fandom, instead of sacrificing vision to pack a house. That's why I love this franchise, and that's why I want to see more like it.
Okay.
Thanks for watching. You can get updates about the show and other stuff that I'm doing at my Twitter, Isaac Last Name. Also, I briefly mentioned this in the video, but Mikey Newman has some amazing videos on the John Wick franchise. So if you're just a super fan and can't get enough of people loving these films, go check those out. Thanks again for watching, and have a kickin' day.